Alternate na lang yung ano natin next week ang ang lecture natin is yung foundation. Ngayon, yung sa application of learning theories. Okay, para hindi kayo mahirapan, ano? Okay, so walang static yung narinig nyo sa akin.
Meron, sir, konti in my end po.
Ayan, guys. Okay na.
Meron pa din po, sir. Pero konti lang naman, sir. Okay lang naman po.
Ayan, okay na. Malinaw na? Okay. Ganun pa rin. Ayan. Ayan, medyo okay na. Okay, sige. Record lang tayo, baka hanapin. Okay. So, good morning again, guys. So, today, we're going to discuss an example of instructional design. Okay, when we are referring to instructional design, that is a collection of a creative activity based on scientific foundation. So today, we're going to look at learning theories as a framework for us to understand the origin of those scientific foundations that support instructional design process and decision making. So as you can see, we have here our agenda. No? So in terms of learning theories, we're going to discuss the topic list. No? So what is learning? What is a learning theory? And then major camps of a learning theory. Then what is the relationship between learning theories and instructional design? And then in reality, what will be the value of learning theories in instructional designers? So as you can see, guys, uh, instructional system design will connect input, means, result together for effective learning or performance solutions. In terms of input information, we have here the learners, no, or the what we call the learners characteristics, learners prior learning experiences. Those are good elements for us to understand which learning theories will be appropriate, which instructional theories will be feasible in order to develop solution for learning and performance improvement. The result part is pretty straightforward, and mostly it is relevant to the needs of the organizational learning or the expectation of your students. Yung tinatawag nating desired outcomes. Okay? So what is learning? So basically, when we are referring to a learning, it is a process enacted by learners that enables them to attain measurable and persisting change of performance according to their modified knowledge, skills, and abilities upon interacting with elements in various learning environments. So there are a couple of keywords, no, in this statement. So first, yung first na nakaread dyan, no, persisting change or performance So that is the first keyword. So those performance also needs to be observable. So therefore we can measure them. Okay. Then the second one, set of keywords such as knowledge, skills, and abilities. So those are the common categories for instructional designers to conceptualize the potential outcome of the instructional solutions. Then finally, the elements in learning environment. The elements will include peer learners, will include instructions or instructors, okay, will include resource online. Those are the eligible elements within learning environment. So those are the keywords now when it comes to term learning. Then what is a learning theory? Okay, we have some understanding in terms of what learning is. Okay, learning theories are, what do we call this? Positioned to explain why and how learning happens across context, okay, across populations, across cultures. Then learning theories will provide a conceptual and empirical frameworks for instructional design and its adaptation and advancement. So basically, we can see learning theories as constantly evolving foundation in order to inform the best practices of instructional design. So what are the components of a learning theory? So first, we have the result. So in the result, what are the changes in performance to be explained by the theory? What are the intended learning outcomes in other terms? Then second one, the component is second one component is the means. Okay, so what are the process that generate those results? What are the conditions that needed to met for generating those results? And then third, we have the input. So what might trigger those processes to occur, such as learners' prior experiences, such as the available resources within the learning environment. So yung learning environment, ngayon, we are referring to that yung mga learning, uh, yung mga LMS natin, no? Learning Management System. So lahat naman kayo mayroong mga ginagamit na modal when it comes to learning. Okay, magkakaiba lang yung mode natin. Okay, however, when it comes to pedagogy, no, if you browse our previous topic, yung week 4 and 5, yung different pedagogy, meron lang tayong certain pedagogy used in the new normal, no? Hindi kasi lahat pwedeng gamitin. Okay? Then, next. So, learning theories have their philosophical roots, namely constructivism, uh, we have the rationalism, and then the other one is empiricism. Okay? Combining with system thinking, okay, cognitism, behaviorism, and then the communication, we are able to devise a what we call instructional methods, instructional conditions. Therefore, when it comes to instructional conditions, achieving intended learning, okay, and then the instructional outcome. And then the philosophical root of learning also help us understand how knowledge could be acquired. So from the perspective of constructivism, uh, it is important to allow learners interact with other elements within the learning environment. So basically, the knowledge is constructed by learner himself or herself. Okay, so the learner says to be active. Learning is all about uh, what we call the meaning making. Okay, learning means to be collaborative. Learning has to be included, or learning has to include peers input. Okay, and learning has to be situated in realistic settings. Then, in terms of rationalisms, the focus is inward. So, in particular, how individual learners reason. So, how individual learners rationalize during the learning process. The knowledge in this context will be acquired through reasoning and intuitive deduction. Okay, interacting with others, interacting with other elements within the environment does not seem as important as the ones happen in the constructive learning environment. Then, with regards to empiricism, the focus is on how learners experience the reality by themselves. No? Yung tinatawag nating self-pace. Okay? So, learner sensory experiences dominate the learning process. What they hear, okay, what they see, okay, what they touch, they are important parts of the learning experience when it comes to uh, empiricism, tatawag nating empiricism. Okay? Then next, when it comes to major camps of learning theories, based on the philosophical roots of knowledge acquisition, there are three major camps of learning theories that are relevant to instructional design. So the first is what we call the behaviorism. So which means uh, it emphasizes the relationship between stimulus and response. Okay. The second is the cognitivism, also known as the cognitive information processing. So in this learning theory, it is focused on what happens in learners' mental structure. Okay, when it comes to cognitivism. Then third, uh, we have the constructivism, similar to the philosophical perspective. Constructivism is what we call this, very interested in providing interactive and rich environments for learners to develop their own meaning towards the reality. Okay. Then, in terms of behaviorism, okay, there are several principles we like to mention relevant to instructional design. So first is what we call the learning is about strengthening the relationship between stimulus and response. Then learning should be observable behaviors. Therefore, we can measure the performance improvement. Then third, learning are guided by behavioral objectives. Okay, behavioral objectives guide the instructors. Then operant conditioning, program instruction, mastery learning, they are all viable strategies based on behavioral principles of learning theories. However, learning is considered passive and learning process needs to be directed all the time. Then, in terms of cognitive principles, malinaw pa ako guys?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. In terms of cognitive principles, uh, first, we have the learning is knowledge acquisition. Although you cannot see them, the process happened within your mental structure. Then the second one, uh, learning needs to be built on your prior or existing mental structure, such as the memory or the different schemas. Okay? The kind of learning process are not observable, which It is very different from the behavioral principle. Then the focus is on what we call the individual learners' learning processes. Interacting with others might not be the most important part according to their uh, particular cognitive principle. Okay. Then next, learning should be mentally active and creative process. And the design of the learning environments need to provide opportunities to allow learners to do activities or to do tasks. No, so that is the or that those are the cognitive principles. Okay, so learning process model of learning and memory. So as you can see, this is the visual representation of a cognitive information processing. Okay, more on memory. No, in particular, we can see how information flows through our mental structure. No, so beginning with the multimedia presentation of the information, words, sounds, and pictures, then it will proceed to our sensory memory. It will collect those information through our ears, through our eyes, or different senses that that we are using when it comes to collecting information. So those information, no, enters to our working memory, which can only hold those information for a short period of time. Then eventually, the information, if needed, will go into our long-term memory structure, which is considered our prior knowledge for the future learning path. So that is how the information process flow into the memory of every individual. No? Then next, so we have the behaviorism and cognitive information processing. So in the illustration, we can compare behaviorism with cognitive information processing. So we think the behaviorism, we consider our mental structure as the black box. Yun yung nasa gitna. Okay? Ito. So this one. No? So yung tinatawag nating black box, we don't really need to know how learners think based on the behavioral principle. So we are only interested in how learners respond upon receiving the stimuli we design. So however, for the cognitive information processing, the CIP, we are very interested in considering how our mental structure as an active processor of information. So how memory is structured, how memory is active, no? When it comes to our working memory. Short-term memory to long-term memory. So the comparison between the two for one will tell us how learning theories have evolved over time. Okay. Then when it comes to foundation of constructivist theories. So, if you remember, no, the third learning theory, which is the constructivist theory. So, in particular, we are going to touch two perspectives, no, to instructional design. The first one would be the Piaget works, no. So the other one is based on the Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. Okay? So according to Piaget, no, development precedes learning. So which means that social interaction of learners is important in order to support effective learning outcome. The next, individuals' readiness for learning is important. So this goes into our emphasis on how learners, prior experiences and the prerequisites of certain learning tasks. Then, in particular, Piaget proposed developmental processes within cognitive stage of development, such as the sensory motors, pre-operational, concrete operational, and then formal operational. So what important for instructional design is the implication, of those stages and how we prepare the learning environment in order to accommodate those developmental stages. Then there are also three processes, okay, or three processes that Piaget mentioned that constantly happen in constructivist learning environment. First is what we call the assimilation. So when we are referring to assimilation, learners encounter new information, new ideas, new events. They are trying to incorporate those occurrences to their existing cognitive structure. Then the second one is what we call the accommodation process. When the new information, new events are different or deviate, from their current mental structure, their current ideas and their current thinking, their current understanding, then the accommodation process will happen, trying to negotiate between new information and existing knowledge or prior, what we call the prior knowledge. Okay. The last process is what we call the equilibration. Okay, when we are referring to equilibration, it is the combination of the assimilation and accommodation. No? It's the constant ongoing negotiation between the two in order to stabilize, in order to finalize learners' mental structures given the new information. Okay. Then for the Vygotsky, or what we call the Lev Vygotsky sociocultural cultural theory, uh, it is a different approach to understand the importance of developmental stage when it comes to learning. Okay, he proposed the interactional theory of development, which suggests that learning is optimal when preceding learner's developmental level. The second one is what we call the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD. No, the ZPD in the result of it is actually the result of thinking. So a very important part of Vygotsky's work is the proximal development, no, or the ZPD. Uh, what does that mean in terms of the CPD? When we design instruction. So basically, Vygotsky is telling us uh, is that when we design new learning tasks, the difficulty level of the developmental level of that new learning task should be a little bit higher than the learner's current developmental level. Okay? So, merong advancement na tinatawag. So, to provide some momentum for learners to motivate them to develop the new skill set or the new knowledge base, so that the basic idea of the CPD, instead of designing learning tasks that are 100% matched with learners' current developmental stage, ZPD, or the zone of proximal development, suggests that what do you call this? We should push the envelope a little bit, no? Kailangan nating mag-advance so that the learner can more motivated, more driven to acquire or to complete the new learning task. Now, so what are the gaps? No? The gap between the higher developmental stage and the learner's currently on this stage. So Vygotsky suggests that we can use peers, we can use collaborations, no? We can use we call this coaching, no, to help learners fill the gap. So in instructors, meron tayong tinatawag na peers. Okay, yung mga even in student, tinatawag din natin yung mga peers, no? So you need to collaborate with them. So not only for your student, no? Especially dun sa mga kasama natin or our colleagues. So we can use coaching to help learners fill the gap. So and that has a strong implication when it comes to instructional design. Okay. Then we have the constructing reality and collaborative settings. Okay. So under pa rin ng constructivism. So by allowing peers, okay, by allowing other resources within the environment, it helps learners bridge the gap according to the previous lesson, no? Yung previous slide natin which is PCAPD. Therefore, creating a constructivist learning environment. So here are some constructivism principles. Okay. First is what we call the constructivism. Constructivism assumes knowledge is constructed solely by the learner interacting with elements in the learning environment. Uh, as I mentioned earlier, no, so those elements could be peer or the peer learners. Those elements could be instructors, could be resources within the learning environment, even beyond the learning environment. Then constructivism also assumes learning goals could include reasoning, critical thinking, understanding of the knowledge, self-regulation, and self-reflection. Those learning goals from the perspective of constructivism are relatively complex. The implications of that would be, for instance, you might need a lot more time for learners to attain those goals within a constructivist learning environment. Then, for constructivist learning to become effective, no, it is essential to design learning environments that are complex, that are relevant to learners' experience. They are meaningful to learners' experience and that cover multiple perspectives to enrich the learning experience. And of course, to facilitate the construction of reality by learners themselves. Okay. Then here, no, uh, translating learning theories into practical instructional interventions. We have already touched the major kinds of learning theories. So this will be translating learning theories into a what we call feasible instructional interventions. Uh, Here, no, the list of questions we could ask as instructional designers in order to associate learning theories with our instructional design practices. So first, how does learning occur? Then what conditions need to met for learning to happen? Then which factors might influence learning? Which factors might inhibit learning? What is the role of the memory? Then when it comes to this question, this touch on the cognitive principles of learning theory. So how does the transfer occur? So transfer from near-term to long-term performance, transfer from this context to the different context, and what type of learning can be best explained by the theory. Uh, Next, what we call the basic concepts that are used instructional design. In other words, what are the limitations of those learning theories in terms of the practical aspect of instructional design. Then finally, how should instruction be structured to facilitate learning? Uh, this is a short list of the guiding question we can ask ourselves in order to situate learning theories into instructional design context. Okay. Then next, we have the relationship between instructional theory and learning theory. So we can see the relationship between learning theory and instructional theory. Among instructional methods, required conditions and outcome. Malinaw ba guys yung image?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So let's start on the left part, no, which is the outcome. So let's say the outcome is the learners being able to, yung example dyan is to calculate the average. Then when the required condition, in second ano na tayo, required conditions, uh, in order to attain that particular outcome, it is important that learners will have to be motivated to do so. The learners will be able to recall certain components such as skills, no, in order to calculate the average mathematically. In order to reach the required condition, no, we should devise a certain instructional method. Yan na yung third part. No? The methods will be first, want to be stimulate learners' motivation using different strategies. We can also demonstrate basic rules to help learners start up the calculation process to have them recall certain skills. So we can also provide examples or practices for learners to warm up to the intended learning outcome. So if we look the line above, no, yung two lines, no, it is very clear that the instructional theories are different from learning theories. Okay? Uh, learning theories will tell us the conditions to be met in order to attain certain learning outcome. So, but learning theories cannot tell us what methods, what strategies we can use in order to develop certain conditions. Therefore, attaining learning outcomes. No? On the other hand, instructional theories are able to help us identify methods so we can again the ultimate goal is to attain certain learning outcomes. So this is what the difference between the instructional theories and the learning theories. Both are important to instructional design, but they do serve different purpose in order to develop effective instructional solutions. Okay, then we have here the reality check on learning theories. Okay, learning theories for IST or instructional system design. So here, so going to ask here, no, what are the practical value of learning theories when it comes to infrastructure design? So we have here the learning theories are constantly evolving. No, it means learning theories are changing all the time because we learn. Okay, they are the way no, on how we learn, the way we perceive learning, the way we measure learning, the way we understand learning also have been changing all the time. No, dati puro lang tayo nakikinig sa teacher. Okay, ngayon, your learner, no? should learn on their own, tinatawag nating self-paced, no? Kaya ang tawag natin ngayon is yung student-centered na, hindi na siya teacher-centered. Okay? Sa new normal, we are referring to that student-centered talaga. That's why we need this, no, to develop a, what do we call this? To develop a standard learning materials. Okay? Uh, so hindi naman sa pangmamaliit, no. There are different, there are some, no, there are some learning content, especially in integrated schools, na mali-mali talaga yung mga informations. Okay? So to develop a standard, no, yung high quality standard learning material, now we should follow those theories. Okay? Then the second one, so learning theories have their limitations. We cannot expect learning theories to explain everything we can see in uh, realistic instructional settings. We have to acknowledge the limitations. Therefore, we can make better design choices. Then we have the learning theories will help instructional designer justify their design decision. So it is important, especially when you are explaining why you choose certain design approaches over other to your client, to your learners, and learning theories will help you make the case. No. Then next, best instructional design practice is based on a well-balanced blend of learning theories in order to achieve the intended learning outcome. So learning itself is complex, which makes sense that we use a collection of learning theories to standard inputs, it means, and the results. Then next we have the learning theories are the most valuable when they reflect on how people learn today and in the future. So in other words, we need to constantly revisit, no, the validity of certain learning theories in order to meet the instructional needs we have today. In summary, we have covered the basic of learning theories, no, relevant to the instructional design. Okay, it is important for instructional designer to have a solid grasp of learning theories and what will go a long way for instructional design practice in the future. So, so as your teacher, no, as your professor, I want to encourage you to dive into learning theories if we have the opportunity. No? It is a constantly evolving field, and I believe that understanding learning theories today will be one of the most important assets for you to become successful instructional designer. Okay, so that's all for the. Okay, so that's all for the application of learning theories to instruction. So marami pa tayong gagamitin dyan, marami pa tayong pag-aaral when it comes to uh, learning theory. So we are still in the instructional design, no? So question, guys. Meron kayong tanong when it comes to application of the learning theories? Okay. So when it comes to fundamentals of ito na kasi pasok to sa pasok talaga to eh kasi when it comes to fundamentals, so pag-aaralan din natin lahat, no? instructional design, pasok din siya doon actually. So kaya pinag-isa ko na lang. So mapapansin nyo, dito sa klase natin, since this is more on education, this is, you are actually educational technology student, no? We are going to focus on the different articles, no, that are published, no? Kasi nandun naman na lahat. So nakasum up na, nakasummarize na lahat doon when it comes to fundamentals of learning theory. So kaya nga kung papansin nyo yung orientation natin nung huli, no, naka-focus talaga tayo more on articles, more on research review, narrative review. Okay? So tinatawag nating article review. So yun talaga yung gagamitin natin, no? Meron din tayong tinatawag na meta-analysis. Okay? Yung last, no, kapag nakabuo na tayo ng portfolio when it comes to publications, so meron tayong tinatawag na meta-analysis. Okay? You're going to compare. So lahat ng binibigay kong article sa inyo, you're going to compare that. So ang tawag doon is a meta-analysis. So yung gagawin natin for the whole term, so aside from discussing foundations, okay, application of instructional design, no? Meron pa tayong tinatawag na narrative review, okay? Systematic review in order to prepare you. Okay, doon sa mga article na binibigay ko sa inyo, I hope na when the time comes na makarating kayo doon sa tinatawag nating operation research, no? Doon sa research ninyo na course, meron na kayong idea when it comes to proposing titles. Okay, doon pa lang makakabuo na kayo ng different idea. Okay? So one of the purpose, so bakit tayo tinatadtad ng ganito? No, kung bakit nga namin kayo tinatadtad talaga when it comes to article. Kasi kayo as teacher, no, tayo as teacher, we need to review some methodology. Yun lang naman ang gusto natin, no? So we're going to adapt new methods kung meron mang mga bago, okay? However, so when it comes to professional growth, ito talaga yung kailangan natin. Aside from having a degree, no, additional degree sa graduate. Additional graduate degree, yung tinatawag natin, yan, yung mga MS, MAED, okay? So ito talaga yung number one. So research, okay? Pero we are assuring you guys na yung mga article that we're going to give you is based on your course, no? Yung fundamentals, no? Yung application of instructional theories or application of learning theories to instruction para pagdating ng mga sa thesis ninyo or pagdating niyo doon sa may research, meron kayong different subject maliban sa thesis talaga, no? Meron kayong preparation for your thesis. Okay, aside from the comprehensive examination, no? Meron na kayong idea. Okay, so binibigay ko rin dito, so ito during comprehensive examination, usually ito na rin yung mga binibigay namin, no? Ganyan, more on meta-analysis talaga. Okay? So, ganun din kay Sir Binluan. Pag nagsimula kayo, ganito rin. Kasi teacher na kayo, hindi na namin kayo tuturuan ng pedagogy. Okay? Because alam nyo na yan eh. Di ba? So, I think lahat naman kayo meron ng license. So, passer naman kayo when it comes to education. Okay? Mga let passer naman talaga kayo. Okay? Kayo nga talaga yung nakakaintindihan. So, kami, we can only provide, no? We can only prepare you, no, for the future, no? For the Edtech. So, question, guys? Kayo dito. 4 lang kayo. Nasaan si Mr. ano? Yung classmate yung isa.
Si Sir Jason Mascari po, sir.
Oo, asan siya?
Hindi pa po nagchat-chat, sir. Baka po may problema po sa internet nila. Kasi last time po, yun po yung sinabi niya sa amin.
Okay. So, ito naman, i-upload ko naman yung video. Then, lahat ng mga ano natin, naka-upload naman dyan. So, yun lang talaga gagawin nyo, no? Masters na kayo. So, hindi na to yung mga exam when it comes to assessment. Hindi na ito yung multiple choice. Mostly narrative talaga siya. Okay. So, question, guys?
Sir, yung article review po natin ngayon sa Newble, sir, hanggang next week po ulit to. Yung under po ng foundation.
Tapos ito, meron din. May idadagdag ako dito for the
Okay.
instructional. Nakita nyo na ba yung iba?
Opo, sir. Chinek ko po ngayon sa Newble ko. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
so, lahat yan, more on article review talaga tayo. So, yung last part, expect ninyo, meta-analysis yun. No? Sa lahat ng mga articles natin, you're going to compare. So, babalikan nyo yung mga sinabit yung mga synopsis, no? In order to have your meta-analysis. So, question po? So, sabi ko naman sa inyo last time, no? Dito lang tayo magkaklase. Hindi tayo magkaklase yung 3 to 6. So, alam ko naman, pagod din kayo, especially yung iba sa inyo, nasa public, at iba talaga yung trabaho sa public, sinusulit talaga kayo. So, alam namin yan. So, marami naman nag-request niyan, even in other school na pinanggalingan namin, na marami talaga nag-request because overload nga talaga when it comes to public. So, sinusulit, no, ang bayad talaga. So, we understand that one. Okay, question pa, guys? So, abangan ninyo yung assessment or task when it comes to the learning theories naman. Okay, yung naka-post dyan, article review for foundation. No? Sana guys, doon sa mga article na binibigay ko, pagdating ng ano nyo, nakakabuo na kayo ng title ninyo. Okay, nakakabuo na kayo ng title. Kasi guys, napakahigpit when it comes to proposal dito sa New Era University. Okay, so sana nakakabuo na kayo, nakakabuo na kayo ng idea when it comes to title ng mga magiging ano niya. Kasi mabilis lang yan. No? Sa amin, hindi naman namin kayo papahirapan. No? Hindi naman namin kayo papahirapan dito. Okay, yun nga lang, kailangan nyo talaga magbasa, kailangan nyo intindihin. No? Guys, be careful when you are creating your article review. No? So magkaiba yan. Okay? Baka kasi pumasok kayo dun sa tinatawag na research article, no? So sa atin, research pa rin siya pero focus tayo dun sa may article review lang, no? Pag sinabi nating article review, more on critiquing. Okay? You're going to critique the viewpoints of other authors on that particular topic. Okay? So pag sinabi naman nating research article review, no? You're going to present the viewpoints of the authors. Okay? So medyo mas mahirap to kasi hahanapin mo yung negative side when it comes to viewpoint. Na pag sinabi nating article review. Nagets nyo guys? So mas magaan kasi yung research yung mga synopsis, mas magaan yon compared to the article review. So careful guys, be careful. Okay? So again, sa article review, you're going to assess. No? I-assess niyo yung mga article na binibigay namin sa inyo. Okay? So sa research article naman, kapag sinabing synopsis, okay? that will be the new article. Okay? Ano yung mga magiging content when it comes to the that particular research, no? And then parehas naman, wala naman tayong limitations when it comes to length. So meron naman diyan guys, meron diyan guidelines when it comes to reviewing articles. Okay? So question po mga kapatid. So yung PowerPoint natin, nandyan naman siya, no? Naka-PDF naman. Okay, then I will upload also the recording. Okay, so kung wala nang tanong guys, so no more questions. So kung wala na, salamat sa pag-attend. Pakiabangan na lang yung ano guys, yung assessment, no, when it comes to application of learning theories. Okay, sige guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you po, sir. Salamat po.
Okay, okay. Okay.